Hey, welcome to the Bible in Today's Culture. This whole series, I have to admit, was designed for you. At least you were the people I had in mind. In my head, I had the picture of a group of Pinnacle Forum people on Zoom or together uh, taking this class and talking about it and reacting to it. So you got to know that's what's in my heart. I hope it relates strongly to what you do. One of the things I wanted to let you know is that whoever's teaching this material uses three different terms for what a culture is made up of. So Pinnacle uses the word mountains, right? Okay. Other people don't call them mountains; they call them spheres. My background, I learned a lot of this through Youth with a Mission. They use the term domains. So whenever you hear domain spheres or mountains, it's the same thing. So don't get confusing that we're talking about something different. We're not. And so what we are talking about is that a culture is made up of 8 domains. We're going to start this course with business and economics, then go to science and health, government, family, education, religion, communication, and the arts. It's a 40,000 foot view. When you get through with one of the domains, it may be something you have a passion for, uh, and you want to go deeper into it. So we're providing lots of material for you to go deeper. So what we're giving to you is really just a way of saying God is interested in every part of your life. And if you want to go deeper in that area, here's videos, books, all kinds of resources that you can use to go deeper. So enjoy the class. We're going to start with 2 sessions, this one and another one on orientation to get you oriented on what we're talking about. So enjoy yourself. Here we go. Welcome to the Bible and today's culture. Welcome to a 40,000 foot view of culture. People are talking a lot about culture, where it's going, what it's going to be, what it has been and isn't like. We're here to set a new benchmark. Well, it's really not new. It's been talked about by the reformers in the Reformation. It's talked about by Jesus, talked about by the prophets, talked about by Moses. It's something we've lost in the last 150 years. So let's take a look at what used to be. We go all the way back to Genesis, and God's looking at his creation. And after every day of creation, he says, that's good. And to the point where after he created man, he said, that's really good. He was pleased about what happened. But we look at it today, and it doesn't seem that good to us. Um, it's got problems. Uh, and C.S. Lewis put it this way, that badness is only spoiled goodness. In other words, God created everything good, and badness snuck in and spoiled the goodness. So our job is to restore the goodness that's there, that's at the heart, that's innate in everything that God created. So our first job, of course, is to get right with God. And our second task is to get right with other people and with creation. But we have a problem in our thinking that allows us not to get right with everything in creation. And it's called the sacred secular split thinking. In other words, we divide up the world into either sacred things or secular things. Sacred means God gets excited about that. He gets a smile on his face when we're doing it. And that's kind of the good stuff. The secular stuff is just stuff we have to do to get by in life. It's not that really important. It's kind of necessities. So what do the sacred things look like? Well, the sacred things are church and Bible study and worship, prayer, pastor, Sunday, church activities, and being a missionary. Those are all going to put a smile on God's face, right? Well, what are the secular things? Things like career, voting, education, vocation, and so on. Well, it seems obvious that this is a good way to look at things. I mean, What do you think is most important to God, church or our career? Well, I mean, things got to start with church, right? I mean, that'd be more important than career. What about Bible study or voting? Well, obviously, Bible study is more important. I mean, that kind of would make us a better voter or something, but this is what's really important. Worship or education. Well, worshiping God is more important than learning math and stuff like that. Prayer and taking a vacation. I think God's much more interested in knowing that we're a person of prayer and we talk to Him every day than we take a vacation 1 week a year. But God's way of looking at things is much different. It's not a sacred secular split thinking. It's that all is sacred. God made everything. So I was teaching this class in a church. And you know how classes start. It was an 8-week class. And at the beginning, everybody's there, and then life happens, and there's less and less people as you go along. And I was teaching the arts, and that was the 8th domain. So it was the end of 8 weeks of teaching. And I was thinking, the crowd's going to be kind of small. I walked into the room, and just about everybody's there. I said, okay, you got to tell me what's happening here, why are you here? And they kind of went around and they all explained why they were interested in the arts. I mean, some of them were real artists and others were, um, they put a price on art. Others were mothers of artists. One guy said, I paint motorcycles. I mean, you want to see a beautiful motorcycle? Come see what I do. They were all somehow related to the arts. I said, well, that's a wonderful common background, but why are you here tonight? And they said, because none of us have ever been affirmed by the Christian community for artistic skills. It doesn't seem to fit into church life or just our Christian life in general. It's kind of something off to the side. So what they were saying is, everybody's been treating it as a secular thing we do, and there's nothing sacred about what we do. That brought me back to my wife confessing to me after we were married that she felt her passion and desire for interior decorating was a curse. I mean, how could God be interested in spending money and taking a lot of time to make a room beautiful? Until she read about Bezalel. Who was Bezalel? Well, he was the first person in the Bible described as filled with the Holy Spirit. But he was also the interior decorator of the tabernacle. All those beautiful curtains that were designed, Bezalel designed them. All that wonderful furniture that was in there, all of the altars and the gold and the silver instruments, Bezalel designed all those. And God said to Moses, make Bezalel in charge of the interior decorating of my tabernacle. Well, that changed my wife's whole view of herself. I mean, when we walk into a hotel room, she usually walks in with a vase of flowers and rearranges the furniture. It just can't be this way. And now she sees that as a blessing. So she has decorated and designed interiors of churches, but she's done it in interiors of businesses, and she's done it in my house multiple times. And it's a blessing to her now when she realizes there is no secular sacred split in who she is. And Jesus thought this way. He said, your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. He was teaching the disciples how to pray. And he says, what you ought to pray for is that earth is more like heaven. But our problem is, as we look at our earth, we don't see it like heaven. We're in the midst of wars right now. Got out of Afghanistan, we're in the middle of the Ukraine war, and it's looking terrible, and the dastardly things are happening. That doesn't look like heaven. And Earth shouldn't be that way. Our job is to maximize the goodness and to make Earth more like heaven. So I learned about this way of thinking from my son, and he was with Youth with a Mission. Okay, it's called YWAM, Youth with a Mission. Got it? Okay. And we were visiting him in China, where he spent 7 years training underground church pastors. And one Christmas, he came home and was telling us about what he's doing. He says, "Dad, you don't understand. I've been in training with YWAM, and it's so different." So he was talking to the pastors, and they had this secular sacred split thinking. They were saying, you know, China is changing. Some of us have been in prison for a long time, and now we come out and people are starting businesses, and we don't know what to say with them, how to be a Christian with these businesses that they own. And Ryan said, well, that's not very difficult. First of all, the Bible says you pay your lowest paid people frequently. They don't have a lot of money in the bank to stretch between long distances between paychecks. So you pay them on a regular basis. So most of the lowest paid people in China are 30 days behind on their paycheck. He says that's not God's plan. And 24/7 work schedule is not a biblical plan. You're supposed to have a day off every week. And that wasn't happening in China. So Ryan simply said, what if your businessmen paid everybody every day or every week? And what if they gave them a day off every week? What do you think would happen? And they said, everybody in town would be saying, where's the Christian business owner that I can work for? So Ryan learned this from Landa. Landa is the dean of the University of the Nations, the education arm for Youth with a Mission, YWAM. And she had been a missionary in China for 20 years. So how did Landa learn about this? She learned about it from Loren Cunningham, who was the founder of Youth with a Mission. He was vacationing in Colorado, and a ranger knocked on his door and said, this guy, Bill Bright, it's called the office. Well, this is before cell phones, and there wasn't even a phone in Loren's cabin. So he said, this guy, Bill Bright, called, and he wants you to talk to him. So Loren ran down to the ranger station, called Bill Bright, and Bill Bright said, God's been telling me some things, and I'm in Colorado too on vacation. Can we get together for lunch? They scheduled it. So the day before Loren left for the meeting, that night, he woke up in the middle of the night, assured that God was saying something to him. And in essence, he heard God saying, you're doing a great job evangelizing people, but I have a greater vision for those people. I want them to do things after they come to me and I'm in their life. I want them to accomplish some things in the world, and you need to take it further. And he gave Loren a list of things. Loren wrote them down on a piece of paper. And the day that Loren left to meet Bill, he took that paper, threw it in his pocket. They got to a meeting. They sat down. Bill began saying, God's been saying something to me. He says, you're doing a great job introducing people to Christ. You've created the 4 spiritual laws. A lot of people are believing that I want to have a relationship with them. But that's just the beginning. There's other things I want you to do. And Bill began to list off the things that God had talked to him. When he was done, Loren reached in his pocket, threw the piece of paper on the table. It was the same list. They couldn't believe it. A few weeks later, they heard Dr. Francis Schaeffer speaking on television. Francis Schaeffer was one of the premier theologians of the second half of the 20th century. And he's saying the same thing. We have got to take people further in their discipleship and in their contributions to the world and creating a kingdom culture. Well, all three of them knew now that God was speaking to them and that they needed to listen and execute on this. And this is the list that God was talking about. It's the definition of culture. It's made up of 8 domains: business and economics, science and health, government, family, education, religion and church, communication, and the arts. We really can't think of anything else that makes up our cultures, right? And God said, I'm interested in all these things. Well, here's how Landa really learned what God was saying. She was channel surfing, and she got stuck on a documentary of a reporter from Britain who was given the assignment to go to the United States and to research how Christianity had affected the American culture. So he said, well, I'll go to the most Christian city in America. He found out that Dallas, Texas had the highest percentage of the population in church on Sunday morning. So he went to Dallas, Texas. Before he met anybody in Dallas, he said, well, let's look at what Dallas is like now. So he checked out, what's education like? Are people in every area of Dallas, every socioeconomic group, every racial group, getting a good education here? Are they treated equally? What is work like in here? What are salaries like? I mean, are people being paid enough to actually own a home and make a decent life? Are there opportunities for them to grow? What are families like? I mean, what's the divorce rate like in Dallas? What do what do people think of being moms and dads and raising kids? What is the government like? Do people feel it's just? Do they feel like the people elected government are there to work for the citizens, or is it just for their own benefit? He went on down the line of socioeconomic things. How much crime is there in town? Are we going to be safe here? Are there hospitals everywhere to protect our health? And then when he compared his results to other cities, he found out Dallas didn't rate that high. Well, it was at that point he decided to go talk to the church leaders. So he went to the most recognized church leaders in town from every stripe, and he said, well, Dallas is the most Christian city in the country, has the highest number of people in church on Sunday mornings. And of course the minister smiled. That was good news. But he said, this is what I found out about the city. I found out it doesn't rank very high compared to other cities and the things that you'd want to have in a city that you lived in. And what surprised the reporter the most was that all the pastors gave him the same answer in their own words, but the same message. They said, well, that's really unfortunate, but it's not my responsibility. I work in the area of the spiritual. Well, Landa was listening to this, and she was saying, that's not what I believe. I mean, when I was a missionary for 20 years in Africa, I thought that people that came to Christ and the Holy Spirit was in their life would not just change their own lives, but their families would be different. Their villages would be different. Their nation would be different from the influence of Christian people in their community. She was struck by this. Her next assignment was to tour Africa. And she said, when I go to Africa, I'm going to look at it the way the reporter looked at Dallas. I'm going to put on the same glasses that he had on to see Africa. So as she was touring Africa, she found out that family life wasn't that great in Africa. Very seldom were there 2 parents raising a family. She found out that government was corrupt, and most people felt like people went into government to get power and to get wealth. She looked at the economy. She wasn't impressed with the jobs that they gave. In fact, a friend of mine, Mike, was underwriting college students in Africa. And as his first student was ready to graduate from college, he said, I got to get him a great graduation gift. And so he looked and looked for the right thing, talked to a lot of people, and realized the best graduation gift he could give was a sewing machine, so the guy could go back to his village and become a tailor, because there was no economy there to absorb this college graduate and all the things he does and to use his education. So Landa was struck at what she saw in Africa. And she had been there for 20 years, and she had never looked at Africa this way. Landa realized that we have been in Africa bringing the message of Christ there for 150 years. We have sent thousands of missionaries. We have sent millions of dollars, and yet we have not affected the culture of Africa. Well, this was the greatest spiritual faith challenge in her life. She had come to know Christ at 22, was an atheist, accepted Christ, had been active for decades, and this was the greatest challenge her faith had ever faced, to realize that all the work we were doing wasn't making the difference that she believed it would make. Her next assignment was to speak throughout the United States, and she was driving by car. It was her habit to read through the Bible from beginning to end every year. Since she was driving, she said, I'll listen to the Bible. I'll put a cassette in the tape and listen to it. And as she was driving through Nebraska and Iowa, cornfields, she had what she called the cornfield revelation. I think it was because there wasn't anything to look at, so she was listening to the Bible hard. So as she was going along, all of a sudden she said that chapter was all about business and economics. I've read the Bible from beginning to end every year for years and years and years, and I've never realized God says something about that. And hey, wait, that chapter was all about government. God's got an idea on government. I didn't know he spoke about government. And that chapter was all about health. And now that chapter was about how a family should function. And she realized God is speaking about all domains of a society, and it's in the Bible. So she decided that she was going to read the Bible differently. She assigned these colors to each domain. So yellow was something about church or God. This was about red was about communication. Brown was about education. And she got colored pencils and she laid them next to her Bible, and as she read, she began to color the verses by what they were talking about of God's view of the culture. Well, all of a sudden, her Bible became a rainbow of colors. And I copied her. So I began to read my Bible this way too. This is a picture of my iPhone, and this is my Bible app, and these are the colors I added to the verses I was reading in Deuteronomy 11. So blue talks about health. Green talks about business and economics. Gold talks about our relationship to God and the church. Tan talks about education. Orange talks about family life. Red talks about communication. My Bible, too, became a rainbow of colors about God speaking to the practical things of my life that I had never, ever seen before. God's kingdom is knowable. It's there. What he has a view for this earth is obvious in the Bible if you're looking for it. Our challenge is to translate what the Bible is saying to a culture 3,500 years ago into the 21st century. So now we got to read it and we got to say, what would God be saying to us today? So today we've been talking about our sacred secular split thinking. We're going to have one more class. It's an orientation class to everything we're going to talk about in this course. And it's going to be on the role of the church in the next class. Here's some discussion questions for what we've talked about today. Read them and take whatever time you have to discuss them. When you're through with the discussion questions, go on YouTube and watch this Worldview video. It'll really enhance everything that we've talked about. So we'll see you next week. And here's your discussion questions. Have a good time.